General Synod is officially called back into session, and I ask our General Secretary to please give us an overview of the day.
Ready for me? Buenos dias. Isn't that a great start to worship the Lord and hear God's word? It's beautiful. So friends, this morning we will hear from the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business, as well as a number of other commissions that we still need to hear their reports and recommendations today. This afternoon after lunch, we will hear from our theological agents and several more commissions. So if you behave and we're done, and we don't have any, so my hope is that we will not come back after dinner, okay? So let's get the job done, before. So if we need to come back, well, we have to come back after dinner to continue to deal with that. I don't want to come back later on today, okay? So let's get it done this morning and then this afternoon, and then you're going to have a free evening. That's the order for the day, Mr. President.
Secretary. I just sat here this morning and I just feel like, for me, if you will allow me a moment to go back and piggyback on Nate's comments yesterday, there's a certain level of pride, not in the best sense of the word, in the worst sense of the word, that I'm a part of a church that has a Pacific Asian ministry team and a Hispanic ministry council, and I assume that we pretty well covered it. And I appreciate the grace and humility that our Pacific Asian group shared with us in worship this morning, reminding me that there are many languages and many cultures, and to have one group, we have not exhausted the breadth of what God is at work and God is doing. So forgive us for giving you one title for this incredible block of people, that we have done all that we can do as a Reformed Church in America. There's more for us to be done. But what a beautiful and gracious statement to us in worship. And Francesca, what Sunday do you have open? No. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eddie, for reminding us not only we have business to do, but if we do it well, we have an evening off. I'd like to invite Cora Tate and also Corinne Ellis, if they would come up on the platform. Cora is the moderator of the Special Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business, and Corinne is the vice moderator. They're going to present to us the recommendations that they have had. If you want to go to your General Synod workbook, it's under Supplemental Reports, Part 1 and 2. And since the Advisory Committee has not been able to meet on the new business yet, that's yet to come. That'll come after. They're having a special meeting tomorrow. While all of you are kind of relaxing and kicking back, they're going to be helping with the work of Synod. But Cora, would you please begin your report for us?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Senate. Overtures are found on pages 110 through 113. Overture 1 on pages 110 through 111, ensure prayers are explicitly Christian in nature. In response to Overture 1 from the classes of Rocky Mountains, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-1. To deny Overture 1 for the following reasons. While we understand the cultural concerns presented by the classes, it appears to the Advisory Committee that the prayer in question does address the triune God revealed in Scripture. Number 2, this is an isolated incident, so it does not warrant action of the full General Synod. And number 3, the advisory committee suggests that the classes of Rocky Mountain direct its concerns to the Commission on Christian Action.
Thank you, Cora. So let me do just a little bit of tutoring here, is that what's before the Synod is the recommendation, not the overture, all right? So the recommendation is from the advisory committee. So if you vote in favor, this is one of those fun moments, this is where Russ Parlberg makes a living. This is one of those fun moments where if you vote in favor of this, we're voting to deny and turn down the overture, okay? To not consider the overture on the floor of General Synod. If the recommendation fails, so it would deny the overture. If the recommendation fails, there is no business before the Synod, and at this point, a delegate could make a new recommendation that is germane to the overture. Otherwise, the business simply continues. So if you vote in favor, the Synod votes to not consider it. If you vote against, it's just not taken up. It basically just kind of is a non-existent event. So it gets a little bit complex and convoluted, but if you can understand that, I'll try to remind you as we actually have the vote. So at this time, I'd like to ask if there is any discussion. And also, when you come to the microphone now, we're getting to more of the business. After you identify yourself and where you're from, who you represent, please indicate the intent of your comment. So you would say either I'm speaking in favor of this recommendation, I'm speaking in opposition to this recommendation, or I'd like to make an amendment, or whatever you're intending to do at the microphone, please inform the body of what you will be doing, all right? So is there any discussion or any debate on ONB 22-1? Microphone 4.
Cameron Van Coten Lawhead, moderator of Commission on Christian Action. I just want to encourage the body to deny this overture, but I want to also apologize as the person who commissioned and edited the prayer in question. It was certainly not my intention to cause any confusion over which God we were praying to. And I would just like to also point out that the Lord's Prayer never mentions Jesus either. But yeah, I just, if you read the reasons for the overture in the workbook, they are very good. I understand if there was confusion. And as somebody who took part in the creation of the prayer in question, I want to offer any apologies that would be necessary, and it is something that will be considered more carefully in the future.
Thank you, Cameron. Any other comments? All right, seeing no one approaching the microphone, and since Eddie wants to get home in time for dinner, so if you have your, John, microphone 3, John Cheng.
John Chen from Queen's Classes. I am from non-Christian world. And each time when we pray and we pray in the name of Jesus Christ is so important. Because in many religions that was the environment I grew up. And every religion, very religious people, they pray. And in that kind of context, I think to say the name of Jesus Christ is so important. That's number one. And number two, I just want to remind you, and including myself, who are we can talk to God? It is not your right. It is not your authority. You have been given this kind of gift to pray to God, and it's because of Jesus Christ. So I'm not ashamed of saying in the name of Jesus Christ. Maybe to some people say, well, we all know that we are Christians, so we pray to Jesus in Jesus Christ. But no, this is not our privilege. Our Lord Jesus Christ said that you pray in my name to the Father, and I will listen. We are all sinners who dare to speak to the Almighty God, and God will listen to you. It is because of our Lord Jesus Christ. So each time in my church, I remind my church people, you can pray because you have the privilege given by Jesus Christ. So by his name to pray for it, because it is the authority. Furthermore, I just want to say something. When you get involved in spiritual warfare, the mighty name of Jesus Christ is so important, so effective. Who are we? Satan will listen to you, and Satan will never be afraid of you at all. But the name of Jesus Christ is the powerful name that Satan is trembling about. So I would like to suggest to all of you, when you pray, don't forget the name of Jesus is so important, and this is our foundation of our faith. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Hearing none, just a reminder, when we vote, if you vote 1, you affirm the recommendation of the committee to deny the overture. And if not, if you vote no, but there's nothing before the body, and we'll continue on with the next order of business. So voting will begin in 3, 2, 1 now. The voting is closed. Body votes 122 to 49, so the overture is denied. Cora, please.
Overture 2, found on page 111 in your workbook. Change the restructuring team report and date. In response to Overture 2 from the classes of Great Lakes City, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-2 to deny Overture 2 for the following reasons. While we understand the frustration of uncertainty and the urgency of this issue, we also recognize the complexity of the work and the time needed to fulfill the mandate given to the restructuring team in a God-honoring and positive way. 2, since the membership of the restructuring team was finalized at the end of March 2022, and the reports will be due in March 2023 for the 2023 General Synod, it would not be realistic to require the team to complete this important work in a 12-month period. Number 3, there is an expectation that the restructuring team will be given reports and requesting feedback. And this shortened time frame does not allow appropriate time for this process. We strongly encourage the restructuring team to give updates after each meeting to help congregation to see a path forward and have a snapshot of the future God has planned for the RCA.
So ONB 22-2 is before the body, and the recommendation is to deny the overture from Great Lakes City classes and discussion. Microphone 4, 2, take your pick, Dan. Microphone 4.
Good morning.
Wow.
Dan Sewell, New Hope Church in Cleveland, and the Great Lakes City classes. You know, the unfortunate thing is, because of the wording of the overture, it was misunderstood. We're not asking the team to complete their work, and that was never the expectation. So what we had done is we had attempted to write an amendment to our overture, and unfortunately, because of differences in time and everything, we weren't able to get the wording out. Now, I did send to the motions desk an amended one, and I don't know, that's not probably up yet, but we have a friendly amendment. Oh, wow. Whoever wrote that's really smart. Thank you.
That's why we clapped for the staff yesterday, Dan, because they were
Okay.
really good.
You're way ahead of me. Anyhow, and my email's kind of goofed up. But we had changed the wording of our overture in conjunction with Michelle Shaheen and Greg Brower, who are from our classes and on the restructuring team, as well as the team from Great Lakes City classes here, to be better understood that, that we wanted to make a heartfelt request that the RCA restructuring team add to their existing timeline, submitting a foundational report in time to be presented to the 2022 annual meeting for the purpose of lessening the sense of uncertainty. We thought about anxiety, we thought uncertainty was okay, and to build upon the vision going forward. And the reason is we would like to be able to take back to our people as soon as possible a foundational understanding that we are moving this forward. And like I say, we did this in conjunction with our members of the team, and we think it is a friendly amendment, and so therefore we would ask that you not deny, but rather look towards an amended overture.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'm going to ask for a little bit of help right now. Our parliamentarian is in conversation with the back. Russ, would we act on the, so my understanding would be if the body wants to consider this amendment, we would vote against the recommendation so that there's nothing on the floor, and then we would bring this recommendation forward for consideration. Would that be an appropriate path?
That's an appropriate path, yeah.
Okay.
We were just having conversations about it. I suppose it's not technically, anything but to deny would be a negation of the recommendation. I suppose technically out of order, but then there could be a motion to put this on the floor.
Well, my point is if we vote to, if we accept the recommendation of the team, this overture goes away and it's not available to the body. Is that fair to say?
Right, but then they could make a motion to put this on the floor. So
They would have to reject the recommendation, though, because if we accept the recommendation of the advisory committee to deny the overture, doesn't that make the overture, doesn't it take it off the synod's business list completely?
Right, but we've just told people
Okay.
that then there's nothing on the floor and somebody can make a motion that is germane to the overture,
Okay.
which this would be.
Okay. So is that perfectly clear to everybody? Somebody at microphone 4 says it's not clear. Please, microphone 4.
Mr. President, Aaron Schulte, Mid-Hudson Classes. I believe as an amendment, what is being offered is out of order. I don't think it's germane to what was given to us by the committee. Is it possible for you to simply rule it out of order? Then we would move back to just what the committee gave us, and then we could deny it and bring it back as a new motion.
So, Aaron, let me track with you. I think I'm with you. So here's, we can start off by saying I don't think it was officially seconded. Don't anybody jump in and say that just right now. Let's assume it's, so really what's before us is still to deny the overture. So I'm going to just kind of make the comment from the chair and try to not go too far into your business and your decision. But I would suggest to you, if you would like to consider what's before you on this, before me on the monitor, was before you on the screen just a minute ago, that you would vote against the committee's recommendation so that the overture stays in front of the body, and then this would be proposed, moved and seconded, and the body would actually vote on what you saw on the screen. Are you tracking with me? Does that seem consistent with what you're saying? So I'm kind of unofficially ruling this out of order so we can vote on the recommendation from the committee. And then if you want to consider it further, you have to turn down the committee's recommendation. You're saying to the committee, no, we want to talk about it. So you turn down that you deny their recommendation, and then you bring this back in front of the body, if you would like. Are we okay? Aaron, you look still confused.
Not confused. I would just say don't make it an unofficial out of order. Make it an official out of order.
Okay.
Knowing that it gets to come back in a minute if
Right.
people want it.
Right. No, well, and I'm just saying there's no second to the motion, so it's not in front of us. All we have in front of us is the recommendation from the advisory committee right now. Everybody kind of okay with that? Got the idea? Good. All right. So have your clickers in hand? All right. So we're going to vote. If, 1 is yes to deny the overture. 2 is to not deny the overture, and there'll be nothing in front of the body unless something else comes to the floor formally. So voting will begin in 3, 2, 1, now. Voting is closed. Okay. So the overture will not be considered, and it's not before the body. Is there a way for redress, Russ? That's the end of it, isn't it? Microphone 1.
Point of order. Lee DeYoung from Great Lake City classes that originated this. I believe, Mr. President, that you did not say, is there a second, before you began to delve into whether it was, the way to go forward. And then there was no discussion on the motion to deny. I believe that should have been allowed before the vote was taken.
I saw indications that the body felt comfortable that they knew what they were doing. And microphone 4.
Yes, I was instructed that we could now make this as a new motion before the floor, and that's the wording that was on the screen before, to make heartfelt requests that the RCA restructuring team add to their existing timeline, submitting a foundational report in time to be presented to the 2023 annual meeting for the purpose of lessening the sense of uncertainty and to build upon the vision going forward. So we would like to make that as a new motion upon request.
It's been moved and supported. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So this is a new motion before the body, and my parliamentarian has not said we can't do that, so this is the will of the body. Is there any discussion? The underlying portion now, so it's really not an amendment, it's a new motion. So is there discussion on the new motion as it's before the body? Microphone 1.
Lee DeYoung, Great Lake City classes. I speak in favor of this motion, but would, for the body, wish to clarify the sense in which the motion was devised or approved at classes level. We were meeting in March, so little was known about what would happen with the direction and how much time was taken. And the purpose that we had in mind was that there would be an opportunity at least to convey by the General Synod a sense of the urgency. Of course, that is balanced with the sense of needing to do this job right. And that those things would be held in tension, and that this would be an opportunity not so much to legislate something that would tie their hands, but merely just to provide some additional feedback. I think one of the reasons for keeping in mind a sense of urgency was alluded to in the General Secretary's report yesterday when he told us that since the last General Synod 8 months ago, there's 68 churches have left, and there are another 60 that are known to have filed petitions to leave. And I believe there's good reasonable information to assume that the number that are thinking about filing is considerably even larger than that. So there is a sort of clock ticking, and these decisions are being made in kind of a vacuum, not knowing what direction this may take. So that the more communicative that the team can be, the restructuring team, the more it will at least reduce decisions that are made without information. Another thing alluded to is that that I heard yesterday, is that there may be a need for this team to consider some urgent changes or revisions or proposals regarding the Canadian laws that have put pressure on Canada. And that, I think, maybe could be brought as a separate module even as soon as next year, even though other things are not complete.
Thank you, Lee. Microphone 4.
Lois Mawson from the Holland classes. I speak against this motion. It feels like a motion to state what we already understand to be the case. We understand collectively that there is urgency. We understand that we are living in tension. And the motion seems to introduce more room for disagreement about what a definitive report is or what a foundational report is. The advisory committee has already recommended to the restructuring team that they communicate often, and I am prepared to trust that that will include communications at the General Synod of 2023.
Thank you, Lois. Microphone 3.
Good morning, Mr. President. Michael McCrary, General Synod Professor, President of New Brunswick Theological Seminary, and a member of the restructuring team. The point that I wanted to make is that it's extremely heavy on, I think, all of us. The lift, what we're called to do, what we're attempting to do is mammoth. And I really just want the body to know that however it works, which I have no real conceptualization or understanding of, our hearts are in it, our minds are in it, and we're all 100% committed.
Thank you, Micah. Other discussion or comments? Okay, seeing none, grab your voting clickers. And so if you say yes, it will now affirm this motion. If you say no, it will deny the motion, and we'll be back to the committee's report. So voting begins in 3, 2, 1, now. The voting is closed. The motion passes 93 to 84. So I'll let that stand without comment. So that's your job, Terry, is to put in the journal just how it happened, and so we have it captured. Okay, Cora, back to you. Next recommendation. So we move on to
Overture
22-3.
3.
Yeah.
Thank you. Overture 3, found on page 112 of your workbook. Add posting date to GSC minutes and adopt additional definition around new business. In response to Overture 3 from the classes of New Brunswick, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-3, to deny Overture 3. for the following reasons. The first part of the overture has already been addressed by action on the GSC, as reported in the General Synod Council serving as the Executive Committee of the General Synod on page 44 of the workbook in the section titled Change in Publication Schedule of GSC Minutes. And number two, for the second part, there is an adequate mechanism in place for dealing with this in the Book of Church Order, BCO. The General Synod votes on a case-by-case basis whether or not to accept an item of new business that is presented, and that's found in the BCO, Chapter 3, Part 2, Article 2, Section 8, 2021 edition, page 130.
Okay, before you is a recommendation from the advisory committee to deny Overture 3. Is there discussion or comment on this recommendation? Seeing no one approaching a microphone, I'm going to ask you to pick up your voting tools. Remind you, 1 is to deny and not deal with the overture. 2 is to turn down the recommendation of the advisory team. Voting will begin in 3, 2, 1, now. Voting is closed. Motion carries to deny the overture, 157 to 15. Cora, please.
Overture 4, found on page 112 in the workbook. General Synod to approve time and place of General Synod meetings. In response to Overture 4 from the classes of New Brunswick, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-4. To deny Overture 4 for the following reasons. 1, General Synod 2021 voted to empower the Executive Committee to make these decisions through its adoption of CO 21-4, minutes in 2021, page 240. That amendment was overwhelmingly approved by the classes and does not need to be revisited in the workbook. See the report of the classes vote on proposed amendments in the Book of Church Order on page 39 in the report to the General Synod Council serving as the Executive Committee of the General Synod. And 2, due to the fact that the venue contracts for an event as large as General Synod need to be signed over a year in advance, the decision of the 2021 General Synod was both practical and necessary.
Okay, you have before you ONB 22-4. Is there any discussion or comment on this recommendation? Seeing no one approaching a microphone, pick up your clickers. 1 is to deny the overture. 2 is to deny the recommendation from the advisory committee. Voting is open in 3, 2, 1, now. Voting is closed. The recommendation of the committee stands 169 to 6. The overture is denied. Cora, please.
Overture 5, found in your workbook on pages 112 through 113. Determine equitable assessment covenant shares formula for dual affiliated congregations. In response to Overture 5 from the Classes of New Brunswick, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-5. To instruct the Commission on Church Order, meeting electronically with representatives of classes with dual affiliated consistories to develop a plan that accounts for an equitable payment of assessments, covenant shares, without placing an undue burden on either classes or the denomination, for report to the 2023 General Synod. Reasons. 1, after talking with representatives from both the Commission on Church Order and the Classes of New Brunswick, this committee affirms that both parties are willing and open to this discussion, and some of the process is already underway.
You have the recommendation before you as you see it. It was on the screen. There we go, it's on the screen. Any discussion or debate on this recommendation? Seeing no one approaching the microphone, 1 is to affirm the recommendation of the advisory committee, 2 is to deny it. Voting begins in 3, 2, 1, now. Voting is closed. The body affirms the recommendation, 165 to 11, so it passes. Thank you, Cora.
And finally, Overture 6, which is found in the Supplemental Regional Synod Overtures Report. To encourage engagement on cross-cultural mission. In response to Overture 6 from the Regional Synod of the Great Lakes, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-6. To strongly encourage all churches within the RCA to find fresh ways to engage at least 10% of their active membership in either a local or global cross-cultural mission by 2024, and further, to direct the General Secretary to promote this throughout the denomination. Reason, this committee supports the reasons provided by the Regional Synod of the Great Lakes.
Recommendation ONB 22-6 is before you. Any discussion or debate on this? Microphone 1.
Dick Van Dont, Muskegon Classes. Question, sir. Where in the workbook is that? What page?
And the supplemental.
Thank you.
Thank Dick. Other discussion? Seeing none? So if you vote 1, you affirm the recommendation of the advisory committee. 2 is to reject it. Voting begins in 3, 2, 1, now. Voting is closed. Recommendation is accepted, 142 to 30, so it passes. Thank you, Cora. Thank you. And since the next 2 recommendations are based on my proposal to remove the conflict of interest here, I'm going to turn over the podium to my Associate Vice President, Dwayne Jackson. Give Dwayne.
We discussed discussed this in great length. This is so you don't confuse us. Okay. ONB 22-7 is before General Synod. What is your recommendation?
Part 2 of our committee's recommendations refer to our president's address that he gave us yesterday. In response to P1 from the report of the president, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-7, to direct the Commission on Christian Action to explore the Alliance for Hope International as a possible partner to equip congregations and members of the Reformed Church in America to support the intervention and prevention of violence, for a report to General Synod 2023. Our reasons were, first, it is important to find tangible ways to address and prevent violence. And two, this is an established organization with a proven track record. Through Transformed and Transforming, the RCA's 15-year goal adopted by the General Synod in 2013, the RCA has committed to working with all the partners that God provides. MGS 2013, R9, page 70 and 71.
Thank you. The recommendation is on the screen. Is there any discussion? Microphone 4.
Cameron Vincoten Lawhead, Commission on Christian Action. I know we were told to behave, but Christian Action doesn't do that. I had a conversation with our president earlier this week when he called me to talk about this. The Commission on Christian Action would be incredibly grateful to have this work sent to us. It is something that we believe strongly in, and I would love to see this body support our commission as we look to work with the partners that God has provided in seeking to prevent violence.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing no one move to the microphone, let's grab our clickers. Vote 1 in favor of the recommendation, vote 2 to deny it. In 3, 2, 1, let's vote. Voting is closed, and the motion passes.
In response to P2 from the report of the President, the Advisory Committee on Overtures and New Business recommends the following. ONB 22-8, to urge all classes and congregations that support RCA Global Mission through partnership and mission shares to maintain those partnerships, and for congregations that have transferred or are transferring out of the RCA to consider staying engaged with their RCA mission partners even when they are no longer formally connected to the RCA to sustain this kingdom witness. Our reasons: first, the RCA Global Missions is doing kingdom ministry that reaches beyond the RCA. Second, the General Synod 2021 affirmed the importance of global mission. And number 3, we added the word classes to the President's recommendation because the classes has direct access and communication with the congregations during the process of transferring out of the denomination.
Okay, thank you. Recommendation is back on the screen. Well, there it is. Is there any discussion? Microphone 3.
I speak in favor.
Your name?
Dan Gillette.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I should know better.
That's okay.
Southwest Michigan classes. I speak in favor of this motion. Also would like to commend our President, Phil Lossing, for bringing the last two motions, and I would also like to commend him for helping us yesterday to grieve well. We need to do that well, and also helping us pivot and start to look towards the future. This motion and the last two, including the one that came from the Regional Synod of the Great Lakes, I believe are an important part of a pivot for us to start to look ahead and see what God still wants to do with us, as we heard so well in our message this morning.
Thank you, Dan. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing no one move towards the microphone, vote 1 in favor of this recommendation, vote 2 to deny it. Everybody find your clickers and let us begin in 3, 2, 1. Voting begins. Voting is closed. And the motion has passed. I want to thank Cora and Corinne and their committee for their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our report for today.
I turn the chair back over to our illustrious president, who is not named.
Thank you very kindly, and I just want to throw in a little personal footnote. During the vote, I just got a text from my Covenant Church pastor friend and colleague, just letting us know that he's praying for us. It just was a cool reminder to me that there's a whole lot of people behind it. More people in the room are in the room with us today, and so keep that in mind as we continue our deliberations. I'd like to invite Joshua Scheid to please, the moderator of the Commission on Church Order, to the podium to present the Commission's report, along with John Opkennorth, the moderator of the Advisory Committee on Church Order and Governance. The Commission on Church Order's report can be found beginning on page 200 in your workbook. It can also be found in the rca.org under the Commission headings. The report of the Advisory Committee on Church Order and Governance can be found at rca.org workbook under the Supplemental Reports heading, or via the one on print copy on each delegate table. Joshua?
Thank you, Mr. President, and greetings to the General Synod from the Commission on Church Order. The Commission is tasked with making recommendations regarding the content and the structure and the style of the BCO, and for providing advisory responses to requests for interpretations. And I'll just humbly say we do our very best to do so. And actually, if I may, Mr. President, since I received a shout out in your report yesterday, well, you may think that my only comfort is the Orange Book. Like you, our only comfort is belonging to our faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. And the Commission is ready to dream big dreams with the restructuring team, just decently and in good order. But we do have a goal that our churches don't exist to serve our polity, but our polity exists to serve our churches as we partner together in discipleship and mission, rooted in the gospel of Christ's kingdom. You can ask me about those after. In response to an overture from last year's General Synod, the Commission considered whether regional synods are a problem to be solved or a reality to be embraced. You will find in our report some discussion of the roles and responsibilities of regional synod, as well as some of the benefits and concerns of potentially restructuring regional synods by affinity. And all of this is in the context of the restructuring team's charge to consider whether regional synods ought to continue to exist at all. So let me just summarize. While synods exist for the benefit of the church, they are not the essence of the church, which is a position shared by a predecessor of mine, Alan Jansen. It's important to note for us that this is not the first time that the General Synod is thinking about a potential restructuring of regional synods. There is much we can learn from past considerations, even if we may arrive at a different decision for the future. All of this is the long way of saying, in our report, the Commission is not offering an advisory opinion on whether or not regional synods are necessary, or even if affinity synods are a good option for restructuring. We simply offer the preliminary work reflected on pages 200 to 203 to you and to the restructuring team. And we trust that God's Spirit will give us wisdom and show us the way. Elsewhere in our report, you will find a summary of advisory responses that the Commission has provided since General Synod in October, updates to the BCO glossary, and you will find the Commission's work, you'll find a brief mention of the Commission's work on other referrals, but you'll find the substance of some of that work, such as our work on the WTS proposal, included in the General Synod Council's report. During the planning for last year's postponed session of General Synod, the Commission became aware that various references to sessions or meetings, and there are 162 of them in the BCO, are not always consistent and they're not always correct. A session is a complete, sorry, this is where I get to educate us on Robert's rules a little bit. A session is a complete unit of proceedings, which may consist of one or more connected meetings. And so for many assemblies in the RCA, these coincide, but for a very relevant example, each annual General Synod is a single session composed of a series of meetings over several days. And so the Commission very carefully reviewed and corrected any discrepancies along these lines, which we have reported to you, along with a few other non-substantive editorial corrections at the end of our report. Also, as a result of our review, the Commission identified 3 other issues for clarification relating to the timing of submission, timing for submission of reports and overtures to the General Synod, and that leads us to the 2 recommendations that we will offer today. First, there are 2 unusual characteristics with the timing of submission for overtures. One is that the BCO provides a specific date as the deadline for overtures from classes, but a calculated date as a deadline for overtures submitted by regional synods. Most other deadlines in the BCO are calculated dates. In other words, X number of days or a certain length of time before something. The Commission believes this should be the case for the classes overtures as well. Second is the use of the word postmarked twice in this section of the BCO, which implies that overtures are physically mailed. However, and I know this may be a surprise to many of you, as I understand it, most or even all of the overtures now received are emailed. And who knows what future technologies will be used. So after consulting with a number of officers and staff of various assemblies in the RCA, Mr. President, the Commission offers CO 22-1, beginning on page 204 of the workbook, to approve the following amendment to the Special Rules of Order of the General Synod in the Book of Church Order, Chapter 3, Part 2, Article 2, Section 7, for submission to the next General Synod for final approval. And the proposed amendment, I'm going to pick up halfway down, would read, overtures from classes shall be submitted to the General Synod office no later than 2 months before a session of General Synod. Overtures from regional synods shall be submitted to the General Synod office no later than 3 weeks before a session of General Synod.
Okay, John, do you have a recommendation from the advisory committee?
The advice of the Advisory Committee on Church Order and Governance, Mr. President, is to vote in favor of CO 22-1.
All right, so CO 22-1 is before you with the recommendation to approve it from the advisory committee. Is there discussion? Anyone to come to the microphone for discussion of this? Seeing none, I invite you to pick up your voting response card. Clicker just doesn't sound distinguished enough for a General Synod vote, so I'm looking for something here. It says response card. So pick up your voting response card. 1 is to affirm this recommendation, and 2 would be to deny it, or to, actually, this is a form, we are approving the amendment, right, Russ? This is not just a recommendation, right? So we are approving the amendment as proposed by the Church Order Commission. 1 is yes, 2 is no. Voting starts 3, 2, 1, now. And voting is closed. That passed. Very good. Thank you very much. 168 to 1. Congratulations, Joshua.
Thank you, Mr. President. And there's always one. They're testing the what did you call it?
It's a voting response card. It says right on it. That's I can read. I could invent it.
I don't have one this year, so yeah. Our second recommendation clarifies the deadline for submission of reports, which currently is 3 months before Synod opens. However, last year, there was an ambiguity as to when Synod opens. In the event of a postponed session of Synod like we had last year, does that mean 3 months prior to the opening of the session that will be adjourned? Or does that mean 3 months prior to the opening of the postponed session? To just simply resolve that ambiguity and provide consistent language with the just adopted overture deadlines, Mr. President, the Commission offers CO 22-2 on page 205 to approve the following amendment to the Special Rules of Order of the General Synod in the Book of Church Order, Chapter 3, Part 2, Section 2, Article 2, Section 5, for submission to the next General Synod for final approval. And I will skip to the last sentence, which would now read, reports to General Synod shall be submitted to the General Synod office 3 months before a session of General Synod.
John, is there a recommendation for the advisory committee?
The advice of the Advisory Committee on Church Order and Governance is to vote in favor of CO 22-2.
Okay. So just to clarify, Joshua, I understood you to say that we would vote yes now, but this will have to go back for approval to the classes to be ratified next year. Did I hear you say that right?
No, to General Synod. These are amendments to the Special Rules of Order of the General Synod.
Right, so but they have to have the second reading is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay. So we're voting to, any discussion on this recommendation? Seeing no one approaching, pick up your voter response card. Voting will begin. 1 is to approve, 2 is to deny. Voting will begin in 3, 2, 1, now. And the voting is closed. Oh, they got their clicker fixed. Oh, their vote, they just upgraded to a voter response card. It now works better. That motion passes 171 to 0. So thank you, Joshua. Anything more?
And thank you, Mr. President. I wonder, but I would have to look to our corresponding delegate from Commission on Church History, if that is the first ever unanimous vote on a Commission on Church Order recommendation. I am so deeply grateful on behalf of the whole Commission, well, to the other 4 Commission members, but from all 5 of us, to Paul Carson and Angela Worthley for their invaluable resourcing of our work. And I've learned, we've been talking about eyes opened, and one of the things I've learned in this position is of the immensely invaluable work of Maria Orr and production staff in the level of detail and work required in updating and publishing the BCO each year. That has been a learning experience for me, and I just want to offer the Commission's deepest gratitude to you all. So thank you. Mr. President, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Joshua, and thank you, John. I want to make sure I'm tracking here. Liz, we're going to nominations, right? No, stay with the order, judicial business. Okay. Next up is a recommendation, or the report of the Judicial Business Committee. So I'm going to ask if Marge Vanderwegen come to the microphone, and Steve Breen. Thank you, Steve. No, sorry, Steve Reed. Marge, I'm sorry. I read a wrong paragraph. We need Steve Breen, corresponding delegate on the Commission on Judicial Business platform. So Steve, come on up, please. This report is in your General Synod workbook in the supplemental section. I'm going to bring the report on Judicial Business 22-1.
Greetings to all of you from the Commission on Judicial Business. I'm Steve Breen, and I serve as the secretary on that commission. In a sense, our commission needs an introduction to the General Synod. Some of it you will see in the heading of our report, but our commission is somewhat different than most in that we do not create our own business. We respond only as the church brings its issues to us, and there have been a number of years that we have not had an oral report that's had a recommendation. Such was not the case this year. We do have one. The Commission on Judicial Business has one member from each of the regional synods from across our denomination, and each of us then represents one of the regions of our denomination. I want to add my thanks also to that Joshua expressed to Paul Carson as well as to Angela Worthley for their great assistance that they provide as staff members to our commission. Reverend Kendra Ben Houghton is actually the chair of our commission, and she actually was not able to be a part of the main matter which we dealt with this year because the tradition is that the person from the particular region who is the matter comes from does not participate in any of the discussions or any of the voting. So we were capably led by our Vice Moderator Thomas Terpstra, who's an attorney from the Synod of the Far West. We deal with the Book of Church Order, and we deal particularly with the section on appeals. And if you're interested in doing some good nighttime reading, read the section on appeals. You will find it page 93 in the BCO. And there's a lot of technical rules that are included there, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But we had actually two matters to deal with. One of them is similar to what we have had in a few preceding years, an appeal that came to us called the Lansing Appeal for a member, and the matter was ruled to be insubstantial and not of a matter that we needed to deal with. That is actually true of a lot of what we comes to our desk. It is simply not substantive enough for us to go through the matter of having hearings and so forth. And so we have shared the result of the Lansing appeal with you. It has been dismissed. The much greater effort has gone into an appeal of the Brooklyn classis regarding Carnegie Reformed Church, which is a member of Brooklyn classis, and the Synod of New York. I just want to remind you that when we talk about entities like a church, a classis, a regional synod, we're not just talking about certain legislative or judicial bodies. We're talking about people. And it happens that in this synod, a number of the people who were involved in this matter are represented here within our General Synod 22. And so I would hope that if there's a discussion period, you remember that we're talking about people among us today. Usually, people like to have things simplified. And I can do some of that, but there is the grave danger that I will oversimplify. But I'll start in this way. Early on, when you become a minister of the Word in the Reformed Church, you learn that you, of course, have responsibility to the consistory of the church you serve, but you also have significant responsibility to the classis. It is the classis that ordains, it is the classis that installs you into a particular ministry. That is a well understood and surely supported by the Book of Church Order, part of our church polity. The classis is the group that supervises ministers of the Word. And also their employment in churches. There are rules for those who are called. They must be approved by the classis. There are also matters regarding those who are employed on a contractual basis. The classis is involved in all of those. The substance of this appeal has to do with this question: is there an occasion in which the church and ultimately a regional synod, the Regional Synod of New York, feels that the classis has not acted in a wise and right and good way to a member church in their classis? in this case the Carnegie Reformed Church, and the person that they had chosen to provide leadership for them, which the classis said no to. Very, very seldom, I would say, it's the first time in my ministry that I can remember that a regional synod, in this case the Synod of New York, took the appeal that really came from Carnegie originally and said, we believe that the classis of Brooklyn has not acted in a right and good and helpful way to this member congregation of the classis of Brooklyn. Therefore, we are going to act. I don't know, as I said, that I've ever seen in my ministry where a regional synod has become involved in the hiring of a pastor in a local congregation. Now, a couple other things I want to say. As we went through this, and you have to remember that our commission includes attorneys as well as pastors, there were definitely times in which we saw procedural things that we'll just call them missteps. The attorneys in our group, who live in a world where every jot and tittle has to be in the right place, had to swallow really hard on some points. Probably we could have said, we're not going to hear this because it doesn't quite fulfill this requirement, and I mentioned those in the section on appeals. However, we believed that if we did that, we would just be dealing with it a year from now, and the whole matter would take another whole year to resolve. And secondly, we did not feel it would be helpful to the ministry of the congregation, to the individual involved, to the classis, even perhaps to the regional synod, to have this continuing to go forward. So we looked the other way for a few procedural things that weren't exactly right and pressed forward to the case. The way that we handled this was we had some preliminary discussions. We went through some of the basic rules that are given in the appeals. And then we received from the three parties, Carnegie Reformed Church, the classis of Brooklyn, and the regional synod, briefs that were about 8 pages long. They were prepared by 3 of the best people in our denomination, including some who are present here in our room today. They were difficult. My wife will tell you that even some of the opportunities that I had to watch basketball games were negated by my reading and rereading and rereading and rereading the briefs. We then met in late April to plan how we're going to do this, and normally this is done in a setting of where the church is or the classis is, but we decided to do this, and this was approved by all parties, to do this via Zoom. So on April 29, the 8 of us gathered via Zoom, and each of the 3 representatives, as I said, 3 of the best scholars in our denomination in terms of church polity, had an hour to present their cases, highlighting things that they had already prepared for us in their briefs. We listened, we asked questions, and we had a very good time. I have to say that even though our commission has never been in the same room together, we have developed an affinity and a great respect for one another across the miles, even just through Zoom. After our morning time with the representatives of the three groups, we then met as a commission and spent most of the rest of the day beginning to process what our decision would be on this matter. We finally began to, as we ferreted through some things, we started to arrive at some common conclusions. We have one of our committee members who is not only trained in law, he is also trained in ministry. He has been both an attorney and a pastor. And he was particularly well equipped to provide most of the writing resources for us. He prepared a report. We met again on Zoom and reviewed it, and we made a few changes here and there. But we think that we came together well as a commission to present what our recommendations are. And this is way at the end of the report of the Commission of Judicial Business. By the way, for those of you who have been hungry in these past years for a good long report from Judicial Business, we hope to have satisfied that appetite this year with our 9-page report. And so, Mr. President, I would like to, after having had that introduction, to then recommend to this synod JB 22-1, several parts to it. To affirm the regional synod's finding that it had jurisdiction to hear the complaint and that there was a prejudice and manifest injustice toward Carnegie, and further, to affirm the regional synod's decision to reverse the classis' disallowance of the contract, and further, to reverse the regional synod's remedy of imposing the existing contract upon the parties, and further, to instruct the classis and Carnegie to abide by the framework outlined in section D2 above, earlier in the report, in exploring the creation and allowance of a new contract for a minister, and further, to vacate the regional synod's remedy of imposing a new supervisor as moot. Mr. President, that is our recommendation, JB 22-1.
Thank you. That is before us now as a body. One thing that, make sure I say this correctly, Russ, that anyone who is either a member of or who has voted before, Russ is going to give us a little input on appropriate of voting in this particular
Just a few reminders for the Synod when we approach an appeal of this nature. First of all, the General Synod, the judicatory now, may request to hear the original parties in the case with their counsel. The Commission has reported that they have done that, but the General Synod is not obligated to. It may, but if the General Synod elects not to, then the General Synod here does not hear from the original parties or their counsel. And then secondly, persons who have voted on the matter in the lower judicatory or assembly, or who have a conflict of interest, which I guess is addressed to your conscience, do not vote on the appeal here.
Okay. So we're going to trust you to recuse yourself. You can put your voter response card on the table and let the rest of your table mates watch it not move during the vote if you want to do something real official. But I'd like to entertain comments on this now from the floor. Microphone 3.
Todd Kreischeld, Zealand Classis, not speaking in favor or against, but just for clarification, should not it say Regional Synod of New York in the recommendation as it is specific about the classis?
Is that editorial?
I'm not sure, was there a question there? I'm not sure.
I think I'm asking if that's an editorial thing that we could take care of in the journal. Would that be comfortable?
I'm good with that. I just think it's important for clarification.
Do you have that, Terry? We're going to add Regional Synod New York where it says Regional Synod.
Yes, that would be fine. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Microphone 3.
Mr. President, Daniel Meter, I'm a Commission on History corresponding delegate, but I'm also a member of the Regional Synod of New York. May I speak to it even though I will not vote on it?
He has the right to speak on the floor. That is part of being a corresponding delegate, as I am.
I would advocate that the body affirms this. However, I think for the future there are two substantial weaknesses that should not be set as precedent. The first weakness is that there are actually two actions that are being asked to affirm. The second action essentially denies the effect of the first. To affirm the Regional Synod's decision to reverse the classis disallowance, and then further later on to deny the effect of that. This should have been two motions because they're substantially different. One is the judgment and the second is the remedy. That's unfortunate. I hope that the Commission takes note of this in the future. The second weakness of this is overreach, I believe, on the part of the Commission. The Commission is not judicial business as a court of appeal, is not responsible for general superintendence or oversight, simply to assess the procedure of the lower court on 4 grounds only, and again, if not for those grounds, simply to affirm the action of the lower assembly. The committee has already said that none of those 4 grounds were met, therefore their decision stands, but then to claim that lack of oversight was done and the care of the class of the congregation is overreach on the part of the committee.
Thank you, Dan. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this recommendation? Microphone 2.
Barbara Pimentel, elder from the Classis of Brooklyn. I am not speaking for or against, but it is germane. I have been to several general synods, and judicial business is tough. I've seen it happen before, but I have not seen restoration and healing be part of it. Whatever the decision is, what I am asking is for this body's prayers, not only for this decision, but for any other decision that is a difficult one and affects people the way the Commission on Judicial Business does. Pray for restoration and healing as we leave and move forward, because it is not part of the process already. So that is all I have to ask.
Thank you, Barbara. Microphone 4.
Sheila Moses, Synod of New York. I cannot vote. Well, I cannot vote in any case, but I want to agree with both with the 2 speakers, but I was concerned the 2 specific items were being handled as one. I think they needed to be separate because one contradicts the other.
Thank you, Sheila. Any other comments? Microphone 1.
Sam Clover, Classis of Rockland, Westchester. I'm not speaking in favor or opposed to the motion. but just to comment that I was looking for the information about this whole issue, couldn't find it in the workbook, looked through the mass of papers on the table, and I just located it. It's 8-page single-space document, well-reasoned. I thank you for your report, but I feel like I need time to process this information before voting. And I would encourage General Synod to give the delegates further time on such an issue like this. Thank you.
Microphone 2.
David Andra from Rochester Classes. I'm not here to agree or disagree with it, but I do agree with the gentleman here. I think we need more time for people to read the entirety of the document.
Okay. Microphone 4.
Humberto from Canada, Synod of Canada. I also agree with my colleagues here. So I need the context in order to vote. I don't feel comfortable voting in favor or not on that. I would like to ask, the Synod to give us time to read in order to vote properly on this issue.
Microphone 3.
Elvis Alvarez, Classes of the Greater Palisades. I concur with most of our previous brothers' opinions. I think that the essence of the context of this particular matter, there should be some sort of an advance notification in a way of a letter for delegates that will be attending the General Synods, because we don't know what took place. We don't know the actual context that led us to this particular time. Thank you.
Before the chair recognizes any more microphones, I just want to give you a piece of historical data that is one of those awkward moments here. But this particular report has been posted for several weeks and been available to the body. So it's one of those things where sometimes knowing what to do and where to find it can be a disconnect between the action and the information that we have. But just to go on record that the information has been available to the body through its provision. So is it 2 or 1? Microphone 1?
Mr. President, Rodney Havman, Classes of Greater Palisades. I just want to affirm what you just said. It's the point of coming up here. The report was on the table yesterday morning. We've had plenty of time to read it. And of course, it was available to us long before that. I'm not interested in doing the committee's work by getting a greater context than what's already presented. And so I think that we should vote on it and trust the work of the committee.
I'm going to ask my advisors for a real quick note here. I'll be right back. My advisor said I had a bad idea. So, good news for you is I will trust them and not inflict my bad idea on you. More discussion on what's before us. So I'm going to invite you to vote at this time. Remind you that if you vote 1, you're accepting the report of the judicial business. If you vote 2, you would decline this report. And I'm not, what are the consequences of that? Is that it has to be referred, they would have to take it up again, or where does it go, Russ, if it gets turned down?
I would assume there'd have to be another appeal. Some other appeal would probably have to be submitted somewhere.
Okay. Russ?
The prior decision that was appealed then would remain.
And the prior decision is going to be at what level? The regional synod level? Okay. So what the regional synod has decided would stand if you vote no. Isn't it fun to wade into the weeds? So pick up your esteemed voter response card for important decisions like this. And voting will begin in 3, 2, 1, now. And the voting is closed. The body votes 133 to 20 to affirm the recommendation of judicial business. Steve, thank you.
Mr. President, this concludes the report of the Judicial Business Commission.
Thank you, Steve. Friends, we're a little bit ahead of schedule on my little orders of the day, but we're a little bit behind schedule and time for coffee. So the good news is we're going to take a break now, and we'll return at 10:45. We'll take 30 minutes. So break now for coffee, and we'll call you back to order at 10:45.
My name is Jennifer Lucking, and I have responded to God's call to serve survivors of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation in Southern Ontario, Canada, by serving as the Executive Director of Restoration Second Stage Homes. When I think about God's call in my life, I think about all the people that God has placed in my life to help me discern God's call. I think about the human geography teacher who helped me realize that I had a real passion for people and for communities and for connection. I think about all the people I met in 2005 when I attended my first General Synod as a youth delegate. I think about the people I connected with there and about how that experience really helped me understand the scope of the RCA. In 2013, God called a group of us to start restorations. We had all been concerned about the issue of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation in our region, and we saw the ways that survivors were not being well served in this region with long-term supports, primarily with safe and secure and specialized housing to help them overcome trauma. So God called a group of us together to start restorations with the goal of opening a home where women could live for up to 2 years and receive wraparound supports to help them overcome trauma. The board of directors, of which I was a founding member of, then asked me if I would consider being its executive director, and I responded to their call and to God's call to be in this role. What nourishes me when the call gets hard is knowing that there is a wider community of support wrapped around me in love and care and prayer. When I tell survivors that there are churches in Iowa and New Jersey and New York and South Dakota supporting this work, they are always in so much awe that there are people so far away from here in Southern Ontario who really care about them, who care about them enough to lend their support. What also nourishes me in my calling is good books and good coffee and good therapy.
Marge Vanderwegen is approaching microphone 1. Will pray for Jennifer. Thank you.
Please pray with me. Almighty, compassionate God, thank you for inspiring Jennifer and the board of directors to begin Restoration Second Stage Homes. We thank you for Nancy's house. We appreciate that you have provided a staff to carry out all of the work. We acknowledge your strength, which enabled Jennifer and her team to minister to women who are leaving human trafficking and situations of sexual exploitation. These women are on the margins of society. These are the least of these, the voiceless. We admire the progress that's been done through survivor-led peer support programs. God knows the reasons he has led survivors to this ministry that has a welcoming, safe environment which empowers them with strength and hope through Jesus Christ. Inspire us to join Jennifer's team to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We remember Jesus' words, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for the one least of these, you did not do for me." Let us serve Christ. In the name of our Redeemer Jesus, amen.
Thank you, Marge. At this time, I would like to call on Judy Nelson to present a corresponding delegate from the Commission on Nominations. And the Commission's on Nominations report can be found in the RCA.org workbook or in the supplemental reports on your table.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to give you all a minute to take the deep dive into the supplemental report section that it took me a long time to find. The report of the Commission on Nominations can be found there. I hope you found it by this time. And it may be helpful for me to acquaint you with the composition of the Commission on Nominations. We are a gathering of 13 individuals. 8 are representatives of the regional synods, 4 representatives for ethical and racial councils, and we are joined by the immediate past president of General Synod. The General Secretary serves as ex officio. Please put the first slide up. Thank you. Who is eligible to serve? The Commission is charged with the responsibility to seek and nominate for openings on the General Synod's commissions, GSC, boards, and agencies, people who exhibit the passion, gifts, and commitment necessary to assist these bodies in their work. We also look to provide balance and the commitment necessary so that the organizations show the balance by considering geography, gender, age, racial ethnic diversity, cultural, academic, and other appropriate expertise in the decisions we make. And this is where all of you come in order to ensure that we have the best opportunity to select outstanding people. We rely on profile forms submitted to the Commission via rca.org/nominations. Shown on the screen right now is the how and who and how of completing a profile. You also received a copy of this in your welcome bag at registration. All confessing members of the RCA are eligible to serve. There are probably hundreds of people sitting in your pews in your congregations who have the gifts and passions to serve on one of our commissions, agencies, or boards, but they do not know how to go about doing so. I strongly urge you, therefore, to consider asking those individuals to start a profile. If you've not started one yourself, please start one soon. In these changing times in the RCA, we may encounter more openings on our commissions than usual. Those individuals selected to fill these openings will have an important role in the work of the RCA going forward. So we are asking for your help in encouraging folks to complete the RCA profile form online and send it to us. I would now like to direct the General Synod delegates to the report of the Commission on Nominations. And in order to provide the denomination with full commission, agency, and board membership ready to take on their work effective July 1st, we are making the following recommendations. I present to you recommendation N22-1. To elect the above-named nominees to serve as members of the General Synod commissions, agencies, and boards, and the Board of Trustees of RCA-related educational institutions for the terms identified, and further, to elect Carol Much to serve as the moderator of the Commission on Nominations for the annual term beginning July 1, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023.
All right, you have the recommendation of the Nominations Committee of this before you. Any discussion on this recommendation, please come to the microphone. Seeing none, please pick up your voter response card. 1 is supporting it, 2 to deny, and voting begins in 3, 2, 1, 0. Open. Voting is closed. That passed 160 to 7. Motion passes. Thanks, Judy. Number 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. The GSC appointed 2 nominees ad interim at meetings held in January 2022. An ad interim appointment is a temporary appointment made by the GSC excuse me, of an individual to fill a midterm vacancy on a commission, agency, or board. He or she typically serves less than 1 year until the next stated session of the General Synod. Therefore, we bring to you N-22-2, that is now on your screen. To elect the above appointees who were appointed to ad interim by the General Synod Council to serve as members of the General Synod commissions, agencies, and boards indicated for the remainder of the terms identified.
Recommendation is before you. Anyone like to speak to that? Pick up your voter response card. Voting opens in 3, 2, 1, now. And the voting is closed. 163 to 4.
Thank you,
Judy?
Mr. President. We have one more recommendation for you regarding the nominees for College Board of Trustees. I present to you recommendation N-22-3 to affirm the election of the above-named Central College nominees to serve as General Synod members of the Central College Board of Trustees for the terms identified, and further, to approve the election of the above-named Northwestern College nominees to serve as General Synod trustees of the Northwestern College Board of Trustees for the determined amount of time.
The recommendation is before you. Any comments or discussion on this recommendation? Hearing none, pick up your voter response card. Voting begins 3, 2, 1, now. And the voting is closed. The motion passes 164 to 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Commission on Nominations wishes to express our appreciation to Jeffrey Allen and E.J. DeWard, whose one-year terms of service conclude on June 30, 2022. We are particularly grateful to Rebecca Hudak, who completes 6 years on the Commission and served this year as Secretary. Her diligence, attention to detail, faithful participation, and positive attitude enhanced the work of the Commission. And to Angela Worthley, our staff support and the backbone of the Commission on Nominations. We extend our deep gratitude for the great depth, detail, caring, and commitment she brings to the work of the Commission. We would be lost without her. Mr. President, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite Daniel Meter, the corresponding delegate from the Commission on History, to the platform. The Commission on History's report begins on page 211 in your workbook.
Mr. President, thank you for the privilege of addressing the General Synod on behalf of the Commission on History. As our President said, our report is on pages 211 to 218 in the workbook. The first part of the report tells you how we do our business. The second part of the report reviews our publications, which is a major part of our business. The third part of the report is a meditation, a sort of a theology on how history, memory, and record keeping relate to transformed and transforming, how the constant movement and dynamic of transformed and transforming is solidified and secured by record keeping, by collecting of documents, and by doing history. History as bearing witness to how God has been with us, sort of Ebenezer's, like the pile of stones in the Old Testament that say, hitherto God has helped us. The report concludes with two proposals, supported by reasons, both of which proposals are intended to secure our sacred practice of bearing witness and giving a faithful account of all of our actions and decisions, not only in human memory, but before the face of God. We live in times of turmoil and creativity, of insecurity and vision. So we have designed our two visionary proposals for security, to secure the archives and the archivist. We want to open the archives to wider financial support, development, and public interest. You understand that our archives, the archives of the Reformed Church, are a treasure house, not just of church documents, but church documents that are foundational to the founding and development of the United States of America. I can't say that about Canada. We came much later to Canada. But our documents relate to separation of church and state. Our documents relate to the expansion of, to the influence of our churches in the defining constitutions of the colonies of New York and New Jersey. Our documents, our church records, are of public interest. We have seen Japanese civic officials coming to our archives for research on the port of Nagasaki and for the history of the Japanese cultural development. So we want to open our archives further to this interest. We also want to sustain the archivist in his peculiar denominational responsibility. The archivist is the only officer of the General Synod, I think I may say this, who has responsibilities to every single committee, council, commission, agency, staff person, staff working group, board of directors, regional synod, classis, and consistory in the whole denomination. No wonder that the office is mandated by the BCO. The more turmoil in the world and the more insecurity in the denomination, the more essential are the archives. The archives provide our church with legal security in any future cases of questions of property, endowments, and corporations. The archivist collects every last document of the General Synod Council, of the staff, and of all the other commissions and task forces, not just for history's sake, but emphatically in order to protect the Reformed Church in this unruly and contentious world. To secure the documents is to secure the legal safety of the denomination. The archivist is an officer of the whole denomination, as responsible for every regional synod and every classis as for the GSC and its staff. The archivist is an officer like a building inspector, a health inspector, a town clerk, a school crossing guard, and sometimes even a traffic cop. When the archivist comes to you, if you're a denominational board member or commission member, and says, "Come on, let's have the documents," all the documents, you think, "Oh, what a pain in the neck. I had 15 phone calls I got to make this afternoon." But there's the archivist with his hand out. Or it might be, "Do I have to give you that document? It might be misunderstood." "Yep, let's have it anyway." Okay. It can be awkward for everyone involved because our natural instinct is that we're all doing good work, so we'll take care of it ourselves. So the archivist has to be something of a pest. And we want to secure that. But 5 years later, of course, the legal counsel for the denomination is very grateful. So our first recommendation is to stabilize the accountability of the archivist. As our staff structure is ever-changing, our General Secretary told us that it's going through another significant change because of transformed and transforming and actually shrinking. So the accountability of the archivist has been unstable from one staff person to another, sort of as an afterthought with their regular portfolios. Furthermore, the GSC task force that's talked about in your report realized that it was both awkward and vulnerable for the archivist to have the documentary conscience for someone who was his boss. Our proposal both keeps the archivist within the GSC staff and stabilizes the archivist's accountability in a higher, wider, less shrinking and less transitory structure. The supervision subcommittee that we're proposing would have a total of 5 members, the chair determined, someone appointed by the General Synod to a commission, and then the GSC 2 appointees and the Commission on History 2 appointees for a total of 5. So therefore, Mr. President, I would like to offer recommendation H22-1. To place supervision and authority for the RCA Archives and its staff directly under an Archives Supervision Subcommittee of the Commission on History, consisting of 2 representatives of the General Synod Council, 2 representatives of the Commission on History, and then chaired by the moderator of the Commission on History.
You have the recommendation before you. I would like to just give the body some additional background information to consider. Kind of from my experience has been at sitting these things, you get this information given, and then you find out afterwards there might be some other information that would be relevant. And so on this particular one, I'm going to ask our General Secretary if he could comment kind of on that structure and staffing related to this position and what the implications are of this, and then we'll pick up at the microphones as soon as Eddie's commented.
Thank you, Mr. President, for inviting me to speak into this recommendation from the Commission on History. I want to affirm, the report, the idea of what the report says about the importance of the archives. The RCA archives have a long history and are an important and valuable part of the operations of the Reformed Church in America, not only at the denominational level, but at a regional and local level as well. So it's not just about maintenance of our history and our heritage, it's also about maintenance of our records that are important for administrative business purposes. So I want to affirm that. I want to affirm the importance of the archives and the importance of the role of the archives in the RCA, because it preserves our history, it preserves our heritage, and also maintains important records. Now, I'm going to talk about my disagreement. You know, I prefer, as the person in charge of supervising the staff of the General Synod Council, I prefer to continue I prefer for the archives to continue to be supervised by a GSC staff member. It is harder for a committee to provide enough support and oversight to the staff person, and makes it very, very, very difficult to ensure policies and are being followed. So you can read the report from the General Synod Council, Task Force, and the Commission on History. Let me tell you, they have put a lot of work, a lot of time, energy, discussion into this already, but the Commission still is not satisfied, and that's why they are bringing this recommendation to the floor of General Synod. So the track record does not give me a lot of hope for a good partnership in supervising the archives. So these are my thoughts about this, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. General Secretary. Microphone 4 was first.
Corson DeVos, Minister Delegate, Classes of Delaware Raritan. I speak to support this motion. We need these documents for a legal perspective. I take this moment to commend to all of us the fact that every one of these churches that is leaving our denomination must leave also behind a copy of their consistory minutes, historic to the date that they leave. These are our records that cover our buttocks in times of legal questioning. I am dealing presently with such a congregation in my own classes that has sexual misconduct on their books. If we do not have copies of their consistory records, we are in trouble possibly in a future day when we cannot prove how we have acted and what we have done. The truth is that our archivist, who manages our archives, is in an awkward position asking those who are above him, who are responsible for his employment, to please ante up the records that are required to make sure that all of our officers, from the General Secretary on down, have actually acted in due deference to our policies and procedures as a denomination. The Commission on History has the responsibility, and at every one of our meetings asks the archivist to give account of his actions. And then we come back to the GSC and ask them whether they can please help us to make others comply. There's a history of noncompliance. This needs to change. The archivist needs to have the ability to agitate without fear and without and thinking of reprisal. Thank you.
Microphone 4 was next again.
George Montanari, delegate from Classis, New Brunswick. This might surprise you, but in my much younger years, I was a bit of a nerd. I remember as a junior high school student at Pompton Reformed Church hearing about the archives and having already in those young and tender years an appreciation for the history of the church. And subsequently, as a pastor serving at Middlebush, we relied on the services of the archivist for our celebration of our 175th anniversary. I'm also somebody who has worked one time in a circumstance where supervision parameters were somewhat murky and awkward to work under. And I speak in favor of this motion because it seems like maybe our archivist is currently in that same kind of a position, and this would bring a lot of clarity to that. So with appreciation for the archives and to give clarity to the accountability structures. I speak in favor.
Thank you, George. Microphone 2.
James Brum, Synod of the Mid-Atlantics. I'm not young anymore and I'm still a nerd. I was also a member of the task force that did all that good work that Eddie commended a moment ago. But with respect to the General Secretary, I would say that it is not his role to be telling us how to vote or how he thinks we should vote on motions before the Synod. With respect, this is a large issue. When the archives was originally established, the Commission on History without the GSC or the General Synod Executive Committee then was in charge of the supervision of the archivist. And a big part of that was because of this awkward relationship the archivist has to all of the staff and the whole church. I would also point out with respect that there is nothing that keeps the GSC from appointing a staff member to be one of those two people that are their appointees to that supervisory committee. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Microphone 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matthew Van Maastricht, Synod of Albany. I speak in favor of this recommendation. I think it's important to note that the archives, or I should say, not only archives, but all the staff being accountable solely to the General Secretary is a relatively new piece in how our staff has worked in the history of our church. And so with this, I think that it's not designed to keep other people out. It's not as though the commission wants to have sole control over things. The commission, as I understand it, asked for a meeting with the General Synod Council some time ago, and that was declined because they wanted to talk about this, to try to come to a resolution. So the commission is happy to collaborate, and that is why the recommendation is to include 2 people from the General Synod Council on there as well. And so I think that with this collaborative approach, we can try to make sure that the records of the denomination, of the Reformed Church in America, not only the historical, but also the legal records are maintained in a way that's consistent with the policies that serve our church well. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I believe it's microphone 1 again. Microphone 1.
Joshua Scheid, moderator of Commission on Church Order, corresponding delegate, and participant of the task force, joint task force as well. I speak against this recommendation because as we discovered on the task force, there's a lot of context that's not portrayed and not worth getting into. My concern is that the task force affirmed 2 things. We affirmed the importance of the archives, absolutely. We affirmed that there are concerns about the supervisory structure that should be looked at. The Archives Task Force did not have the time or the capacity to look at those. And some members of the task force, including the Commission on Church Order, have reservations that jumping to this recommendation, the Synod may be acting too quick without understanding the full impact of such a move. And I can't make any motions or anything, and I don't even have a solution or a way forward. But I think that there needs to be another group of some sort that takes a good look at this to find a good way forward.
Thank you, Joshua. Microphone 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. Michael Hardiman, Classis of East Sioux. I speak in favor of H22-1. In 2011, my spouse Elizabeth and I were called as co-pastors of the Reformed Church in Plano, Texas. At the time, the congregation was a member of Central Iowa Classis, meaning that the majority of our Classis colleagues were located some 700 miles away. When that congregation's consistory discerned that God was calling us to disband as a congregation and dissolve as a corporation, the RCA archivist became a key contact for us as we sought to engage in these realities. The archivist provided clear instructions in terms of how to handle historical records as the congregation disbanded. He became an incredibly helpful asset at a point in time in which our congregation and congregational leaders needed direction that was clear, helpful, and kind, even as a pest. Therefore, I offer the following reasons for supporting H22-1. Number one, staff deserves supervisors who are interested and invested in their work. In this case, supervisors who are interested and invested in the archives. Number two, lately supervision of the archivist has been a revolving door within the GSC staff. Due to the peculiar nature of the archivist's job, it does not fit within the purview of any particular GSC staff person. Given all the realities facing our denomination, there has been instability and uncertainty in supervision of the archivist. And finally, number three, the archives relate to all the congregations and all missions through world mission and church extension and church planting, as well as to regional synods, classes, and boards outside the GSC's purview, and is the only staff office that does so. That is why the 2 and 2 representatives on the committee, 2 from the GSC itself and 2 from the Commission on History, which answers to the General Synod for the whole denomination. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Microphone 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Ned Beadle. I'm with the Classes of California and also with General Synod Council. I'm the moderator of General Synod Council, and I would speak against this, and for the following reason. First of all, it's not an equal distribution of how the archivist will be supervised, because it is 3 people from the Commission on History and 2 people from GSC. If you look at the recommendation, it is the chairperson of the Commission on History is also part of that. So that's 3 and 2. It's not. There's not a non-biased person there that can help regulate that kind of discussion when you have those kind of discussions that happen. The other thing is that I was moderator when the letter came from the Commission on History to meet with the GSC, and GSC decided not to meet with them, and the reason was not to meet with them because we didn't want to meet with them. They wanted to meet without the staff present, without the General Secretary present, who is a member of GSC, and we could, to meet without that, we would have to go into executive session, which then nobody can attend that session. We were welcome to have them come and speak to the General Synod Council with everybody present and have an open and direct conversation. That they chose not to do that. They wanted it only without the General Secretary or any staff people there at that meeting. So that's why we refused to meet with them under those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Stephanie Duskett, delegate from Illinois Classes. I speak in favor of the recommendation for various reasons that have already been shared, so I'll dispense with that. But I also want to say that healthy institutions have checks and balances. And I believe the attempt that is made through this recommendation provides just that path for us. With all due respect for GSC staff and its diligent work, I think there is a reason to have another way of informing what the archivist prepares and saves for us. And so it can be done objectively and would foster a greater sense of trust and accountability that should assure the entire denomination that all aspects are being looked at with regularity. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Anyone else like to make a comment? Seeing no one, I'm going to invite us to pick up your response card for voting. And, oh, excuse me, one more, microphone 2.
I beg a moment of indulgence for depravity. Depravity is hitting my computer. I was sending a motion. James Brum, Synod of the Mid-Atlantics, tried to send a motion to refer. I'm not sure it got to the back because my computer died while sending the motion. I am hoping that I will not be penalized for depravity brought to us by Microsoft.
Did it make it through, Did not make it through yet. It did not.
Okay. To refer H22-1 to the Commission on Church Order, working with Commission on History and anybody else they see fit, for report back to the 2023 General Synod.
Motion to refer, did I hear a second to that? Second, okay. So in essence, motion to refer back to the Commission on Church Order, the Commission on Church History, and any other interested, relevant, pertinent, helpful parties that could go with that. I think those are the words you used, James.
Whatever you say the words I used were, Mr. President, I'll go along with it.
Okay. So no debate on a motion to refer, Russ? This is debatable? Okay, so this is debatable. So anyone like to comment, discussion on the motion to refer? Microphone 4.
Mr. President, Aaron Schulte, Mid-Hudson Classes. I suppose I speak in favor of the referral. Just to name the obvious, I feel like in this moment we are being asked to choose loyalties between either our staff of GSC or the Commission on History. I just don't want to do that. It doesn't feel like the Church of Jesus Christ. I don't feel like I have enough information. And I certainly don't want to walk away having either side feel like someone won and someone lost. It feels like everyone lost. So I guess while I'd like to see us be able to make decisions, refer.
Thank you, Aaron. Microphone 2.
Thanks. I'm Mark Mulholland, Classes of New Brunswick, Elder Delegate, and also a geek. In my day job, I've worked for quite a few years with NOAA, weather and climate data in the Department of Commerce, with census data, and I support the motion because to do this data archiving right is a huge job. And just a couple things that I would point out from my experience is that you need a group of folks just to work the data policy, how to archive, policies on access to data, policies on data integrity. And then you also need some folks working the operational end of it. How do you put it on the cloud? How do you make handwritten documents that are 400 years old searchable? What sorts of access rules do you set up? And it's a big job, and I believe with the whole history of this denomination, and as was mentioned earlier, how much it's intertwined with the history of the United States, I certainly support doing it right, and I certainly support putting the resources into what needs to be done. Thanks.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matthew Van Maastricht, Synod of Albany. I speak in favor of this motion because I think that the original recommendation is important, and I think that referring it to talk about it is a good thing. I want to point out here as well that this is not we're not talking about the United States House of Representatives here. We're not talking about Republicans and Democrats who are fighting one another and struggling for power. We are talking about a collaborative way to go ahead. And so I think that it's important to understand that it's not about counting the numbers of people and who's on this side and who's on that side. We're all on the same side. So we want to collaborate. And so if we can make that collaboration better and clearer, then I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else speaking to the motion to refer? Microphone 4.
Corson DeVos, Minister Delegate, the Classes Darrell Raritan. Mr. President, I can speak in favor of this motion. The underscore here is responsibility to this body by all its members, whether that's a consistory in Iowa or in New Jersey or in Ontario. wherever that consistory is, wherever our staff people are, they are responsible to this body for what they do, and they need to report. We need mechanisms that allow that reporting to take place, that allow us as a body to be responsible, not just to ourselves, but legally responsible, as our minutes are being taken right now to prove that we have done this in good order. And so to refer this and come back with a solution to what is right now a difficult question is perfectly fine and in order with how we work together.
Microphone 2.
Caitlin DeVries, Zealand classes. I'm joining the Commission on History starting in July, and I didn't know I was joining such a hot button commission, so I'm excited for the work that we'll do together. I'm not speaking for or against this recommendation, but just want to name the reality that clearly there are some tensions here that I was not aware of, and that that postponing this for another year does leave our archivist, who I don't know, and who is a person in that point of tension. So I just want to name that reality and affirm the good work of the archivist.
Thank you, Caitlin. Anyone else comment on the motion to refer? Seeing none, pick up your voter response tool, response card. Voting, this is a motion to refer. If we refer, it comes back to the General Synod next year as a report, and it will be done for discussion this year. So if you're in favor of that, 1, opposed 2, voting begins in 3, 2, 1, now. And the voting is closed. Motion to refer passes 150 to 25. Dan, if you can take us to the next recommendation.
Mr. President, our second proposal is to expand the financial support of the archives without taking away its core funding as a necessary operation of the General Synod. We want to access the kind of funding that would open the archives to the interest of the wider world. But those funds are unavailable until we establish a 501c3 organization, just as a number of our historic congregations have done, like Old First Brooklyn or Old Dutch Kingston, to allow us to get federal funds, federal grants, of which there are many, and would be appropriate for the remarkable collection that we have, to make it available to the public and for preservation. Let me note that our recommendation assumes that any outcome of the process that we are proposing will require the approval of General Synod itself, as stipulated by the BCO Chapter 3, Article 7, Section 1, that any structure will have to be approved by the General Synod. Reverend President, may I offer recommendation H22-2 to authorize the establishment and incorporation of a Reformed Church Historic Trust as a 501c3 organization to support and benefit the RCA archives, and that the structure will be determined by the Commission on History in consultation with the RCA's General Counsel, the RCA's Chief Financial Officer, and others as needed, and reported to the 2023 General Synod.
You have before you H22-2. Discussion or comments on this recommendation? Microphone 2.
Brandon Beebe, I'm a minister delegate from Southwest Michigan classes. I speak in support of this, surprisingly to myself. In my work in consultation with congregations often, I find that historical burdens of buildings and other assets and the resources that require those maintenances often divert resources away from current missional opportunities and focus. And I think in terms of thinking of all of the funding issues that we may be coming up with and how we want to direct those funds in the future, setting up an agency that can receive funding that's tangential to our core mission, things like having public documents available to the public, receiving public funding that our mission dollars aren't supporting, seems to make sense, especially when it's not just the purview of the Historical Commission, but also the General Council and other financial entities within the General Synod. I think that makes sense and may free up resources for us to focus on mission in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Microphone 1.
Dirk Wheeldry, elder delegate from Zeeland Classis. I also am very much in favor of this proposal. I would ask a question of clarification. The terminology in here says reported to the General Synod, and I believe in the presentation it said would be brought for approval by the 2023 General Synod. I would just like some clarification on that, and wondering if an amendment would need to be made to reflect what the actual presentation said.
Okay, I'll ask Dan, can you respond to that?
The reporting to the 2023 General Synod is meant there to be the timeliness of it. It's the BCO that requires the approval no matter what we say in here. So the BCO requires that it be approved, requires that the General Synod approve it. The reported is there in order to give the date, the timing.
So from the question I hear you asking, Dirk, is we would officially approve it.
That's up to the General Synod when they want to approve it.
So this is not to approve the 501c3 on this vote. This
Right.
is to form the report. Is that helpful?
The General Synod can choose to...
Not having it in front of me, again, I can't see it, but I thought that the wording said to create...
Screen, please.
To authorize the establishment. So by voting in favor of this, we would be authorizing the establishment of this without seeing the structure.
You are not prejudicing the decision of any future General Synod on whether to approve it or not on the basis of the report. What we're saying is the report has to come by 2023. The General Synod 2023 can approve it or not, change it, amend it, postpone it, move it another year, move it to 2024. The approval is completely within the purview of the General Synod itself. We're just talking about when to report it. And we're not saying that it needs to approve it once it's reported. I don't...
Yeah, so Dan asked, so what you're saying is that this, I'm using lay language now, but what you're doing, you're saying is there's going to be a team formed and they're going to put together all the details that would create this entity, this 501c3 trust. That report will come back to the Synod next year, and that Synod has complete latitude what to do with that recommendation. So we're not forming the corporation on this vote. They would be affirmed by a subsequent vote. Does that help you, Dirk?
That's what I would like to see. I'm not 100% sure that's what the proposal says. And again, I am 100% in favor of this idea. I just want to make sure that what we have accurately reflects the intent of the Commission on History.
I believe there may be some substantive help behind you. Microphone 1. Just try microphone 1 and then come back, Dan, if you need to.
Yeah, Joshua Scheid, Commission on Church Order. I'm in favor of this as well, not that it matters, I'm a corresponding delegate, but I do believe there is a lack of clarity because the instruction is to authorize the establishment, which can be interpreted that this General Synod is saying, yes. I would suggest that just to help us move along and clarify everybody's intent and good intent here, that somebody may want to make a motion that would simply at the very end where it says and reported to the 2023 General Synod, perhaps somebody would want to move to amend to say for report and approval, to be considered for approval by the 2023 General Synod.
Okay. Being a correspondent delegate, thank you for sharing that perspective, but somebody needs to do that then. So I'm going to go to microphone 3 and then microphone 2 next. Microphone 3.
I haven't had time to type up what Josh just said, but I would make that motion.
Mr. President.
Hold on 1 minute. I think we're at, before we move on, Dan, do you have a comment related?
Mr. President, I'm just wondering whether it could be editorial on the part of the council for the denominational council and the chair of the church order to get working together with me. It's up to you.
Yeah.
You want to go for an amendment, go ahead. I'm just wondering whether editorial might be enough.
Right. Well, my feeling is it doesn't substantively change. It clarifies what we're doing, but because someone might say no, it says authorize and establish, so we've approved it, and this would give clarity and not leave us kind of wiggling a little bit. So Dirk's going to type it up and send it in, but can we keep on moving microphone 2?
If you recognize me, we can keep on.
Go ahead.
moving.
Go microphone 2. Go for it.
Rodney Habman, Classis, delegate of Greater Palisades. As I read this, I'm not sure that we need to do any of that stuff. As a General Synod, we have the right to approve the establishment and incorporation of Reformed Church Historic Trust as a 501c3, and then if I can have the recommendation up in front of me because I don't have it memorized, please. Then, once we've established that, Commission on History will then form the structure of that 501c3 and then bring that to General Synod 2023 to approve how that 501c3 is structured, which is different than an establishment and an incorporation, to my understanding. Right? So we're being asked to, this General Synod, approve the 501c3 as a new incorporation, and then next General Synod, which we won't have any power over, ask them to approve the structure put together by the Commission on History.
So Dan, I'm going to ask if that's consistent with that. What does that do, that comment do from what you're understanding?
Mr. President, I'm also learning, and that would be that's probably the better reading of it. I apologize.
I think that this is fun to have us working this hard to go where we all agree we want to go, I think.
In other words, what the delegate was saying, that if this body thinks it's a great idea, authorize it, then we get to work to make it happen, and then it's before any further General Synod to say, not only don't we like the way you make it happen, but we don't even want to authorize it. But this gets it going, and yeah.
So I'm going to go, I think, microphone 4, and then back to microphone 2.
George Montanari, Classis of New Brunswick. Mr. President, I offer an amendment. And that is to exchange the word authorize for the word explore, to explore the establishment and incorporation, yada, yada, yada.
I don't see yada, yada, George, in the... No. Thank you. So there's a motion to amend. Is there a second to that motion? Is there support for that motion? So the amendment's going to take precedent. You hold your place. You get to keep microphone 2. You keep your place in line if we have additional comment. So now before us is an amendment to the motion. So if anyone would like to comment on the amendment, microphone 1.
Rodney Habman, Minister Delegate of the Classis of Greater Palisades. It's my understanding that the Commission on History did explore this. Like, we're asking them to do the work for this year that they did this year, or for next year what they did this year. Like, what new exploration are they going to do that they've not already done? All right, so I speak against the amendment.
Okay, I'm going to ask microphone 2. Do you want to speak to the amendment?
Sure, I'll speak.
To the amendment? Okay, microphone 2.
Mark Anderson, Central Iowa Classes. I would speak in favor of this amendment also because part of the establishment of 501c3 is when you establish that 501c3, you have to have originating documents which explain your structure. And so I agree with the confusion generally in terms of the authorization and establishment and General Synod approval. So I would speak in favor of the change to explore because it just gives option and latitude for that we aren't saying, yes, create this organization without having any idea about what the structure is going to look like in its establishment when it's focused. So I would support this as a positive change.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Steve Young, Classes of Chicago. I speak against the amendment because congregations are leaving now, and we need the work of this trust to get down to work. I think we can authorize it so that an application can be made to the IRS and that things can get going. I don't think it's time to wait to consider further. So I speak against the addition of the word explore and the deletion of authorize.
Thank you, Steve. Microphone 2.
Barbara Pimentel, Classes of Brooklyn. I want to speak in favor of this amendment because what we're not discussing or seeing as part of the report is the relationship of this new trust to the RCA and the issue of property ownership of documents and how the relationship between this new trust and the RCA will address that.
Thank you, Barbara. Microphone 3, and then back to you, Ed.
Kim Van Est, ESU Classes, GSC. I speak in favor of this amendment because I think there is further research that needs to be done before we as the Senate decide to establish this. And I would like, if it's okay with the President, for Jaleesa to speak to some of her questions, our CFO.
So this is a request for Jaleesa Tietzma. Jaleesa, would you have any input for us in the formation of something like this? If you would come down to microphone 3, please.
I just have a number of questions that I think would need to be answered, and so if there were more time to explore, I think that would be a good idea. A couple of questions I have are, is it going to be an agency of the RCA? What kind of entity, how does it fit into our structure? Who would be the employees of this? Would there be separate employees, or is it still that they be employees of the GSC? Who would be on the board? Is there a separate board to govern this new 501c3 organization? I also think it's difficult to raise funds right now, and maybe there are more grants available that I'm not aware of, but we're losing a significant portion of our donor base, and so raising funds can be difficult. And so I wonder, is it necessary to have a separate board for this, or could a fund be established within our current structure? I also wonder who will do the work of establishing this new organization. Is that something that staff will be asked to do, or Commission on History? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Jaleesa. Going to recognize microphone 1.
Rodney Habman, Minister Delegate, Classes of General Greater Palisades. The language of this, to me, seems pretty straightforward, right? To authorize the establishment and incorporation of a Reformed Church Historic Trust. Part of the establishment and incorporation is to put the structure together along with all the documentation, all the things that the previous speaker just talked about, right? So it's not like we're saying, okay, this thing exists. We're saying we're authorizing you to do the work in order for us to then receive that work in the structure that the Commission on History has put together, and the next General Synod will then say yay or nay, right? We're not saying yay or nay to a 501c3 that's actually been established. We're authorizing the establishment, right? So I think that, number one, I would speak against this amendment because they'll come back to 2023 and say, okay, will you authorize us to do this now? And until we authorize them to do it, they can't do it and then get back to us with the structure. And time is of the essence. I mean, Jalissa just said, where's the money going to come from? Well, that's part of why we want to do this, I would think, because you get the federal grants, the state grants that we can't do if it's an organization within our establishment. So, speak against the amendment, and then maybe I'll take a second time to speak for it if you agree and turn it down, but whatever.
I'm going to go to microphone 3.
Michael McCrary, General Synod Professor, President of New Brunswick Theological Seminary. I'm just lifting up the issue that the seminaries are under the Reformed Church of America's 501c3, and we get federal funds.
So, before us at the moment, it's been moved and seconded to amend the recommendation as presented by the Historic Commission to authorize, change it to explore the establishment. So I'm going to call on the body to vote on that. If you pick up your response card for voting. 1 is you approve the amendment. 2 is you revert back to the original motion for consideration. Microphone 4 would like to clarify that.
I am not sure whether I'm speaking to or against, Mr. President. Corsten DeVos, Ministry Delegate, Classes Delaware Raritan. Whereas I understand the reticence of this body to approve something they do not know the structure of and the relationship of to the denomination. I understand that. At the same time, somehow we need to give these folks who are doing this work the authorization to at least create the paperwork for the establishment of this entity. They will, in their work, hopefully, consider all that has been stated here by the other delegates who have come to the microphone. But somehow the wording has to allow them to do the paperwork. There are forms to be filled out, there are work to be done that could have the entity, let's call it, on the edge of being real, pending approval of the structure by the General Synod. Somehow the wording has to allow that or force that to happen. Explore doesn't give you that paperwork. Explore just comes back and says, we think we might do it like this. So it would be nicer if it would be much more timely for us if we allow them to actually do all that paperwork, and then if it was just simply a matter of changing some of the structural things and that was approved, that would be the simplest.
Microphone 1.
Joshua Scheid, Commission on Church Order, and I just want to help the Synod understand the language of explore does accomplish all of this. The commissions also do have some leeway to take their own initiative on bringing proposals, and so the language of explore and our conversation that we've all been having affirms to the commission we want to go in this direction, and commission, bring back not just next year, hey, we want to form this, do the work, report back the structure of what you want this 501c3 to look like as a recommendation to Synod next year. It accomplishes everything we're asking the commission is asking for.
Okay. You've heard a lot. Looks like you're ready to vote. We're voting on the amendment to change from authorized to explore after we hear from microphone 3.
Sorry, Phil. Todd Kreischeld, Zealand Classis, Minister Delegate. Is the just a point of is the RCA already a 501c3?
I believe that's true. Is that?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a true statement. So these grants that we would be able to get, why can we not apply for them already and use our current 501c3 status? That's my question.
Okay. Dan, James, do you have some input? I'm going to ask microphone 2. I'll let James.
James Brum, Synod of the Mid-Atlantics, apologizing profusely because I was trying really hard not to come back here. This is not an issue of being a 501c3 or being under the umbrella. It is an issue of the archives is part of a corporate entity which is identified as a church. New Brunswick Seminary is part of a corporate identity which is identified as a school. This may not make sense to us, but that's because it's the government. Can't do anything about the government. I can tell you that the Presbyterians, the Lutherans, the United Methodists, and the Mennonites, and probably some other denominations, have done this same thing in order to be able to, among other things, receive secular grants. That the grants are written so the church cannot receive them.
What I hear you saying, James, is, and forgive me for kind of jumping in here, somebody can say if we're off base, but some churches are forming 501c3 corporations to do ministry that qualify for community funding and grants that they can't come directly to the church. That's in essence what we're doing, is establishing an affiliated 501c3 that qualifies for more funding.
Some churches did this 50 years ago. We are more careful.
Mr. President,
yes.
It's not just government, it's many foundations and corporations are prevented by bylaws from donating grants to a religious organization. However, there has been much room made. That's why it's called a trust, Reformed Church Historic Trust, that trusts are able to receive this even if they are connected or even as an agent of a religious organization.
Thanks, Dan. I just point out that shows they've done some homework on the original proposal too. Microphone 4.
Kenneth Samla, Rocky Mountain Classes. I was just looking at their report and the reasons. Reason number 3, it says, currently the archives is ineligible for state and federal grants incorporating separately, like the Board of Benefits Services and the Church Growth Fund makes the archives less dependent on the annual General Synod Council budget and assessment income. So, borrowing his word over there, if there was a process that they could apply for this funding, that's my question.
Ken, I'm going to take a chance on just answering that directly, is that the reason we need to establish this is because we cannot apply and qualify for funds without a separate 501c3. So even though the church has a 501c3, we need the trust versus a religious institution. So that's the separation that we're struggling with. So is that, anybody want to disagree with that? Okay. So the answer to Todd's question is no, we can't apply now and qualify for the same funding that if the establishment of this 501c3 would qualify us for.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to go to microphone 2 and then back to microphone 3. Microphone 3 first.
Felix Dianugraha, corresponding delegate from Western Theological Seminary. Mr. President, I wonder if one of the staff of the denomination could clarify whether our 501c3 status as for Western Theological Seminary is indeed that of a school or a church. My understanding is that this 501c3 status that we have enjoyed as a seminary is classified under the umbrella of the church, which have allowed us to not file a Form 990 every year to the IRS.
Want a clarification for Western Seminary?
Just our 501c3 status as a whole.
Okay. I don't know who is going to be able to provide that answer in short order. Paul, I'm going to kind of look to you. You've got this legal hat. Just, okay, microphone 4.
Mr. President, point of order. I understand that Western's concerned about their status. That is not the topic we are supposed to be talking about right now. There is an amendment before the body that we're supposed to be voting on.
I heard the question being the RCA 501c3, what the 501c3 is for the RCA, which is a part of the conversation. Well, I'm going to put that question on hold. I'm going to go to microphone 2 next, I believe. So, Andrea?
Okay. Andrea Godwin Strimler, Classes of Central Plains. Mr. President, I want to call the question.
Thank you. Okay. I wonder if we can do that with the, Felix, I'm going to trust we can get you the clarification as a sidebar from this, if that doesn't change the substance. So the vote right now is to close debate on voting on the amendment, all right? So if you're in favor of closing debate, vote 1. If you want to continue discussion, press 2. And voting will open 3, 2, 1 now. Voting is closed. The debate is closed, 161 to 10. Chris, I don't know that there's an opportunity to have any other comment. I think we go directly to a vote. Russ? Right. So, so we're going directly to the vote on the amendment. So if you're in favor of the amendment, press 1. If you're opposed to the amendment, press 2. Voting opens in 3, 2, 1 now. Voting's closed. The amendment passes 105 to 72. So the motion as amended stands before us now, and I recognize microphone 2.
Chris Vanderbilt, the Classes of Albany delegate. I call the question.
Okay. Can you have to vote on that? Okay. So the question has been called to have a vote on the motion as amended. So if you want to vote directly, press 1. If you want to open the floor to more discussion, press 2. Voting is open in 3, 2, 1 now. And voting is closed. Motion to call the question is passed, 160 to 112. So the body will now vote on the recommendation as amended. If you are in favor of this, press 1. If you are not, press 2. Voting opens in 3, 2, 1 now. Voting is closed. The motion passes 159 to 14. Back to you, Dan.
Mr. President, I learned early on, never predict a consistory meeting. Mr. President, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Dan. And I'd like to ask Liz Brand to please come up and give us our announcement before we have our lunch break.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you probably noticed when you came in for plenary this morning, it's been a little rainy this morning. So due to the weather, we plan to move the time of the prayer at the peace pole to this evening instead, following the afternoon plenary. I'll give you an update in this afternoon's announcements. If the weather continues to be rainy, then we'll postpone it to Monday because we assume you don't want to stand outside in the rain for 20 minutes. 2 regional synods will meet over lunch today, starting at noon. The regional synod starting as soon as you can get to the dining hall. I didn't edit that part. The Regional Synod of the Mid-Atlantics will meet in the President's Dining Room, which is on the left side of the Central Market Dining Hall when you enter. The Synod of the Far West will meet in the Dining Hall side rooms 105 to 108, which is located on the right side of the Central Market Dining Hall when you enter. Please go through the dining hall line and take your meal to the appropriate room. And because we've gone late today, Central's Dining Hall has graciously agreed to serve lunch until 1:30. Plenary will still begin again at 1:30 here. However, you have an extra half an hour to get your food. So, Mr. President, this concludes my announcements.
Thank you, Liz. I'm going to ask if, just for general courtesy, we could allow those 2 regional synod groups to be first in line to get to their meeting, please, if you would, Mid-Atlantics and Far West. And following a prayer by Kent McCurd, we will be adjourned, or recessed, sorry, not adjourned, but recessed until 1:30. Ken, microphone 2.
Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we love you. And I believe we can hear you say you love us more. We have just spent time in intentional conversation. And I would ask that you would summon the angels scattered around your throne to minister grace to each one gathered. And as we gather for lunch, we ask that you would temper and guide our conversation, refresh us so that we might be well prepared for our next gathering together. In the precious name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
See you at 1:30.